In a world absolutely drowning in data, I mean, where every single notification brings a new headline or a fresh data point, another opinion to sift through, we're all looking for a compass, aren't we?
Definitely.
A true shortcut, maybe, to being genuinely well-informed, not just, overwhelmed.
Right.
But what if being well-informed isn't merely about collecting a vast array of facts? What if there's something deeper? A kind of insight, a profound understanding that can fundamentally reshape not just what we know, but how we see the world, how we act within it, maybe even how we lead.
That's a powerful idea.
Today we're going to dive into something truly fundamental.
Wisdom.
Wisdom.
Yeah, and this isn't about raw intelligence, we're just piling up academic accolades. It's something richer, something deeply woven into the very fabric of who we are, I think, as individuals and as a society.
And what's genuinely fascinating about this isn't just its philosophical weight, right? It's becoming clearer and clearer that wisdom isn't some ethereal, abstract concept just for ancient texts. Right. Not just for dusty books.
Exactly. It's a vital, really actionable quality that's absolutely crucial for navigating the complex, often chaotic landscape of modern life and, maybe most urgently, modern leadership.
That's the perfect framing for our mission today, I think. We're embarking on a truly captivating journey into the world of character strengths and virtues.
Okay.
We're going to systematically unpack what these actually are, sort of delving into how leading psychologists have meticulously classified them.
Right. The classification itself is fascinating.
It is. And then we're going to zoom in significant detail on that profound and, dare I say, increasingly vital concept of wisdom. We'll explore not just what wisdom means for individuals, how you listening might cultivate it in your own life, but also its critical yet often, as our sources suggest, nearly vanished role in contemporary leadership.
That nearly vanished part is striking.
It really is. And most importantly, perhaps, we'll look at how organizations can intentionally cultivate this sometimes elusive quality to navigate today's incredibly complex challenges, what the sources aptly call wicked problems.
Wicked problems, yeah. And to do this, we've drawn from a really rich and comprehensive collection of sources. We're leaning heavily on extensive academic handbooks on character strengths, those foundational texts from the APA and Oxford University Press.
The big ones.
The heavy hitters, exactly. Beyond that, we've looked into specialized research on developing character, including work from fields like Christian social work, which offers some unique perspectives on moral development.
Interesting angle.
And critically, we've integrated insights from recent dissertations that directly address the cultivation and development of wisdom, specifically within contemporary business and leadership contexts. So it's a real tapestry of insights, hoping to give us a holistic view.
Excellent. All right, let's begin to unpack this, starting with the very bedrock, character strengths and virtues. Now, for a long time, psychology, and maybe understandably given its origins in medicine, tended to focus heavily on what was wrong with people.
Yeah, deficit model. Yeah.
Exactly. It was very much a disease model, almost exclusively aimed at diagnosing and treating dysfunction. But a profound shift occurred with the emergence of positive psychology, didn't it?
It absolutely did. A sea change, really. Positive psychology fundamentally rejects that exclusive disease model when it approaches human character. Its core tenet, as our sources highlight, is to be as focused on strength as on weakness.
Balance.
Right. It's as interested in building the best things in life as in repairing the worst. And crucially, it's as concerned with fulfilling the lives of normal people as with healing the wounds of the distressed.
So it's not just about fixing problems.
Not at all. It completely reframes our perspective, viewing character strengths as the bedrock of the human condition. The belief here is that actively living in alignment with these strengths isn't just, a nice idea. It's considered an important route to the psychological good life. It's genuinely about building up human potential, not just patching up deficits.
I find that shift incredibly empowering, focusing on building the best in us. So within this framework of positive psychology, we hear these two key terms, virtues and character strengths. Yeah. Now, in everyday conversation, they often seem interchangeable.
They do, yeah.
How do these sources differentiate them? What's the relationship there?
Well, they are indeed distinct, yet deeply interconnected. You can almost think of it like a hierarchy.
Okay.
Think of virtues as the broad, abstract ideals, the sort of higher-order categories that represent universal excellence. Our sources identify 6 core virtues: wisdom and knowledge, courage, humanity, justice, temperance, and transcendence.
The big 6.
The big 6. And these aren't just arbitrary labels. They are described as abstract ideals encompassing a number of other more specific virtues that reliably group together into a recognizable higher-level category. They're the overarching, universally valued blueprints for human flourishing.
Okay, so if virtues are these grand umbrellas, these big ideals, what then are the character strengths? Are they the practical ways we actually live those out?
Precisely. That's a great way to put it. Character strengths are defined as the psychological ingredients, the processes or mechanisms that actually define the virtues.
The ingredients.
Exactly. They are the distinguishable routes to displaying one or another of the virtues. So let's take the virtue of wisdom, for example. You don't just have wisdom, you achieve it, or maybe better, express it through specific strengths like creativity, curiosity, love of learning, open-mindedness, and what the researchers call perspective.
So multiple paths to the same peak.
Exactly. These are all different psychological muscles, if you like, but when you use them, they collectively contribute to embodying that overarching ideal of wisdom. Researchers have meticulously identified 24 such specific character strengths across these 6 virtues.
24 specific routes. That's a powerful idea, that there are specific, practical, actionable ways to get to these larger, often abstract ideals. And what's truly remarkable, I think, given the incredible diversity of human cultures and histories, is that these virtues and strengths aren't just Western constructs, are they?
No, not at all.
The research really emphasizes their universality.
It's one of the most compelling findings, I agree. The classification project deliberately went to great lengths to avoid reflecting only our own take on the good life.
Smart.
Yeah, the sources explicitly stress that these virtues and strengths are ubiquitously recognized and valued across incredibly diverse cultures throughout history and across different philosophical and religious traditions. I mean, think about that for a moment.
Yeah.
Qualities like justice, humanity, courage. You find them woven into the fabric of ancient texts from China, India, Greece, and in modern societies across every continent. This cross-cultural recognition is absolutely crucial because it suggests we're tapping into something more fundamental about human excellence.
A shared language.
A shared language, exactly, for what it truly means to flourish, regardless of your background or where you live.
So this isn't just another casual catalog of desirable qualities like be nice. There's real scientific rigor behind this classification.
Yeah.
You mentioned it's almost like a manual of the sanities to complement psychology's historical disease model.
Right.
How does this approach fundamentally differ from, say, a simple list of values like maybe William Bennett's virtue catalogs or even, the Boy Scouts list?
That's a critical distinction. While those catalogs certainly provide a language for moral evaluation and discourse and highlight important goals, they often lack the explicit empirical grounding found here. They don't typically offer explicit rules for deciding where entries go based on their features, or, crucially, how to recognize progress toward these goals. This new classification, however, intentionally draws a parallel to a very well-known framework in psychology, the DSM.
The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the kind of common vocabulary for mental health conditions.
Exactly.
So this project is aiming to do for human strengths what the DSM did for psychological disorders. Give us a standardized language for scientific inquiry.
Precisely. That's the core goal. To provide a common vocabulary for strengths. I mean, think about it. If every scientist used a different word for, say, courage or measured kindness differently, how could they compare findings or build on each other's work? It'd be chaos.
Impossible.
Right. The DSM provided that essential universal language for disorders, making rigorous research into psychological disorders possible. This classification aims to do the same for strengths. The aspiration is to give psychologists ways of thinking about strengths, naming them and measuring them.
So it allows for actual science to happen around these concepts.
Yes. The ultimate proof, as the sources say, will be in the science that develops around it, including thoughtful interventions that nurture character strengths in the first place or get them back on track if they have gone astray. It's about moving beyond just opinion to empirical understanding.
That makes so much sense. It establishes a genuine framework for scientific inquiry rather than just a collection of, desirable traits. Which leads to another important question. Are these traits fixed? Like, are you simply born with a certain amount of curiosity, for example? Or is it something that could be developed and changed over time?
That's where trait theory offers crucial insight. Character strengths are viewed from a trait theory perspective, meaning they are seen as individual differences that are stable and general, but also shaped by the individual setting and thus capable of change.
Ah, so both stable and changeable.
Exactly. There's a balance. This isn't considered a fool's errand, a naive hope. Our sources point to substantial studies, for example, on traits like honesty, showing consistency in behavior that is as robust, statistically speaking, as the effects found in incredibly well-known social psychology experiments.
Like Milgram's obedience study.
Milgram's obedience study, or Darley and Latane's bystander effect research. So while there's a degree of inherent stability or, our tendencies, there's also a significant acknowledgement of environmental influence and, most importantly, the tangible potential for development and growth throughout a person's life.
That's incredibly relieving, actually. It
Yeah.
genuinely means we can work on these aspects of ourselves. We're not just stuck.
Not at all.
And the hope, as you mentioned earlier, is that this science will lead to intriguing findings that move far beyond what every Sunday school teacher or grandparent already knew. I love that phrasing.
Me too.
Like showing that prudent individuals avoid unwanted pregnancies or that loving people have good marriages. Those are considered ho-hum findings because, well, they seem obvious.
Right. Not exactly groundbreaking.
So what kind of deeper, truly surprising insights are they hoping to uncover with this framework? What would be not ho-hum?
Well, the aspiration is for discoveries that genuinely advance our understanding of human potential in ways that aren't immediately apparent. It's about attracting the most curious and imaginative scientists from future generations to positive psychology.
Okay.
Imagine uncovering the subtle mechanisms, the unexpected interactions, or even sometimes the surprising conflicts between these strengths. For example, understanding how a specific blend of strengths might give rise to a new, previously unrecognized positive outcome.
Ah, the blends.
Yes, or perhaps revealing counterintuitive ways in which certain strengths, when maybe overused or applied in the wrong context, might actually hinder well-being. It's about moving beyond simple correlation to understanding causation and the intricate dance between these human qualities.
That leads me perfectly to my next thought. The intricate nature of character. It sounds like these strengths aren't always isolated units. Can they blend together to form other qualities that we commonly recognize as virtues or positive traits?
Absolutely. That's one of the illuminating aspects of this classification, how it reveals that some commonly perceived virtues are, in fact, complex combinations of multiple character strengths.
Like what? Give me an example.
Okay, take tolerance, for example. It's not identified as a singular strength in this model. Instead, it's described as a complex blend of open-mindedness and fairness.
Open-mindedness and fairness.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Right, or similarly, patience, a quality we all admire,
I
right?
definitely could use more of it.
We all could. Well, patience actually melds self-regulation, persistence, and open-mindedness.
Wow, 3 strengths for patience.
Yeah. This really highlights the nuanced, interconnected nature of character, showing how different strengths can work in concert, creating something greater than the sum of their parts. It's like a psychological recipe, almost.
I like that, a psychological recipe. So it's not just about ticking boxes for individual strengths, but understanding how these qualities interact and combine. And a crucial distinction, then, is that these character strengths fall in the moral domain, setting them apart from what might simply be considered talents and abilities.
That's a key definitional point the sources emphasize, yes. Talents and abilities, think being a gifted musician, an exceptional athlete, or a brilliant mathematician, are generally seen as more immutable and less voluntary.
More inherent, maybe.
More inherent or developed through very specialized training in a specific domain. Character strengths, on the other hand, are intrinsically tied to our moral choices, our will, our capacity for personal growth. They speak to the kind of person we choose to be, rather than simply what we are able to do.
Ah, the choice aspect.
Exactly. This distinction firmly places the conversation about human potential into the realm of qualities we can consciously cultivate and develop, influencing our ethical actions and our overall contribution to the world.
That's such a foundational understanding. Okay, so with that bedrock laid, let's turn our attention to what many consider one of the most intriguing and, frankly, elusive virtues: wisdom.
Wisdom.
The very idea of this work as a manual of the sanities immediately suggests a focus on human potential, which wisdom clearly embodies. But what is wisdom really? It's clearly more than just being smart or having a high IQ.
Oh, absolutely. Our sources unequivocally emphasize that wisdom is not synonymous with IQ, general intelligence, or academic honors. It's definitely not reducible to the mere sum of books read, or lectures attended, or facts acquired.
So it's not just accumulating knowledge.
No. Instead, as one researcher, Kramer, articulates it, wisdom involves exceptional breadth and depth of knowledge about the conditions of life and human affairs, and reflective judgment about the application of this knowledge.
Application and judgment. Keywords.
Exactly. The Berlin Max Planck Institute, a leading research body on this, defines it even more succinctly as good judgment and advice about important but uncertain matters of life. So it's about applying knowledge effectively in messy, real-world situations, especially when things aren't clear-cut.
Important but uncertain matters. That sounds like most of life.
Pretty much.
So it's about applying knowledge effectively, especially in complex, uncertain, and often human-centric situations. Not just knowing what, but knowing how, and crucially, when. The source gives a truly illuminating anecdote to drive this home.
The highway one.
Yes. Directions back to the interstate do not qualify as wisdom unless the highway is the metaphoric route to the life well lived.
I love that quote.
Me too. It really makes it concrete. It's about the bigger picture, the profound implications of choices, not just the immediate task.
It perfectly captures the essence of perspective, which is the specific strength within the wisdom and knowledge virtue class that most closely aligns with what we traditionally call wisdom.
Okay, so perspective is the wisdom strength.
In this model, yes. It's about taking stock of life in large terms, in ways that make sense to oneself and others. It's the skilled coordination of this information and its deliberate use to improve well-being. So while getting directions might be smart or knowledgeable,
Right.
True wisdom or perspective helps you navigate the entire journey of life effectively and meaningfully.
Okay, so perspective is the specific strength embodying wisdom itself. But the overarching virtue of wisdom and knowledge is actually made up of 5 core strengths that contribute to it. Let's dive into those, starting with creativity. When we talk about creativity here, what exactly are we defining it as beyond just, artistic talent?
Right, good question. Creativity in this context is much broader than just art. It's defined as the ability to produce ideas or behaviors that are, 1, recognizably original, so novel, surprising, or unusual, and 2, critically adaptive.
Adaptive, meaning
Meaning the ideas or behaviors must make a positive contribution to one's life or the lives of others. Has to be useful or beneficial in some way, not just weird.
Okay, original and useful.
Exactly. The sources also distinguish between big C creativity, the kind exemplified by famous transformative artists and scientists, your Michelangelos or Einsteins.
The groundbreaking stuff.
Yeah, and little c creativity or everyday creativity, which is far more accessible. It involves ingenuity or cleverness in daily problem solving.
Like figuring out how to fix a leaky faucet with duct tape.
Maybe. Or finding a novel solution to a household dilemma, a new use for an old object, figuring out a tricky scheduling problem at work. It's that everyday ingenuity. Interestingly, the precise link between big C and little c creativity is still an active area of research. They don't fully know how connected they are.
That everyday creativity is something we can all relate to, though. It sort of democratizes the concept.
It really does.
And there's a truly compelling anecdote in the sources about the transformational power of creativity, with the deeply moving case of Elizabeth Layton. Can you share her story with us? It really stuck with me.
Oh, it's an incredible story, certainly. Elizabeth Layton was a 68-year-old retired homemaker who had endured profound, debilitating depression for over 3 decades. Just imagine.
30 years.
Yeah. After the tragic loss of her youngest son, she was plunged into an even deeper despair, reaching a point where she actually contemplated suicide. At her sister's gentle suggestion, almost as a last resort, she enrolled in a drawing class.
Wow.
And through this artistic expression, she truly found her mission in life. Her drawings became this incredibly powerful outlet for pent-up feelings and beliefs about death, sadness, societal injustices she observed, her own personal grief. This creative process wasn't just a casual hobby, it was profoundly transformative.
It gave her a voice.
It absolutely did. It allowed her to process immense pain and make sense of her world. Her work, which was raw and deeply honest, ultimately gained widespread admiration, powerfully demonstrating how creativity can quite literally shift one's well-being and provide a renewed sense of purpose even late in life after immense suffering.
That's an incredibly moving story. It really underscores how creativity can be life-saving, purpose-defining.
Yeah.
Okay, next up, we have curiosity. This feels like such a fundamental driver, not just of knowledge, but of human growth in general.
It is indeed. Curiosity is described here not merely as a fleeting interest, but as a deep desire to make sense of the world and to feel competent within it.
Making sense and feeling competent. Okay.
Yeah. Cognitive models suggest that as humans, we are inherently motivated to resolve incongruity, basically. When something doesn't quite fit our existing understanding, when there's a gap or a puzzle, we're driven to learn more, to find that optimal correspondence between expectancy and perception.
We want things to make sense.
We do. And what's particularly fascinating here is a somewhat counterintuitive finding. Knowledge fuels rather than quells curiosity.
Really? You'd think knowing more would satisfy it.
Right. But no, the more you learn, the more questions you have, the more aware you become of the vastness of what you don't know. It creates, as the sources say, a rich avenue of untested and falsifiable hypotheses. Learning opens more doors than it closes.
That resonates so much with how we approach these deep dives. The more you know, the more questions you have, the more paths open up.
Yeah.
Are there different types of curiosity mentioned, or is it just one singular drive?
Yes. The sources differentiate between two key types. There's diversive curiosity, which is a broad, kind of diffuse desire for experience-seeking, thrill and adventure-seeking, boredom susceptibility, and willingness to take risks to obtain novelty.
A novelty seeker.
Exactly. Think of someone who loves trying new restaurants constantly, traveling to unfamiliar places, picking up lots of different hobbies, maybe just for a short time. Then there's specific curiosity. Much more focused. It's an orientation toward investigating specific objects, events, and problems to understand them better. This is the scientist meticulously researching a single phenomenon, or the historian digging deep into one event, or the hobbyist deeply mastering a particular craft.
Got it. Different flavors.
Different flavors, yeah. And both types correlate with significant positive outcomes. Things like general positive affect, a willingness to challenge stereotypes, enhanced creativity, a preference for challenge in work and play, a greater sense of perceived control, and interestingly, negative relationships with perceived stress and boredom.
So curious people are less stressed and bored.
It seems that way. Curiosity truly appears to fuel positive emotions such as excitement, enjoyment, and attentiveness. It's really a wellspring of positive experience.
That makes perfect sense. Excitement and enjoyment are definitely positive byproducts of genuine curiosity. Okay, moving on to open-mindedness, which the sources also wisely called judgment or critical thinking. This seems absolutely vital in today's world, doesn't it?
Oh, critically important. Perhaps more so now than ever, with information and misinformation everywhere. Open-mindedness isn't merely about being agreeable or simply lacking strong opinions. It's about actively, intentionally considering arguments and evidence for opposing viewpoints.
Even the ones you really disagree with.
Especially those, even ones that challenge your deeply held beliefs. And being genuinely willing to change one's view when presented with better, more compelling information. It demands intellectual humility and a conscious, deliberate effort to move beyond one's initial biases or gut reactions.
That sounds hard.
It can be very hard. And what are some of the common pitfalls that open-mindedness helps us navigate or avoid? Because we all fall prey to them, don't we?
Oh, definitely. Guilty as charged.
We all are. Two significant cognitive biases that open-mindedness directly counters are my-side bias, that pervasive tendency to favor our own arguments and perspectives while maybe unfairly downplaying others.
Confirmation bias, basically.
Very related, yes. And the polarization effect. This is where, paradoxically, mixed evidence that actually supports both sides to some extent, can actually strengthen existing beliefs if not critically examined.
How does that work? That seems backward.
Well, imagine two people with opposing views reading the same nuanced report. Without open-mindedness, they might selectively pick out the bits that confirm their own biases and dismiss the rest, becoming even more entrenched in their original position. They walk away more convinced they were right all along.
Wow. So the same evidence drives people further apart.
If they lack open-mindedness, yes. Research shows that explicitly instructing people to consider the other side, to actively try and understand the reasoning behind the opposing view, can effectively reduce such biases.
So you have to actively work at it.
You do, and this raises a really provocative question for positive psychologists that the sources mention. We know that strong negative emotions make a person less open-minded. Think intense fear or anger shutting down rational thought. But could extreme positive feelings be just as incompatible with rationality?
Wait, being too happy could make you less rational.
That's the question they pose. In bolstering people's happiness, do we inadvertently undercut their critical thinking? It challenges us to consider if there's an optimal emotional state for truly objective, critical thought, or if relentless positivity might, in some cases, blind us to necessary critiques or inconvenient truths.
Wow, that's a genuinely deep and even slightly uncomfortable question for positive psychology. It really makes you think about the necessary balance between feeling good and thinking critically. Okay, let's talk about the next strength, love of learning. This seems like a natural and beautiful extension of curiosity, doesn't it?
It is, and it's much more than just enjoying school or getting good grades. Love of learning is characterized by an ongoing and ever-deepening cognitive and affective relation with particular content.
Cognitive and effective. So thinking and feeling.
Exactly. This means individuals with this strength aren't just acquiring facts, they are cognitively engaged, actively thinking, wrestling with ideas, and they typically experience positive feelings in the process of acquiring skills, satisfying curiosity, building on existing knowledge, and/or learning something completely new. It's an active, joyful pursuit.
The joy of learning.
Precisely. And this strength also has incredibly important motivational consequences. It helps people to persist in the face of setbacks, challenges, and negative feedback.
Persistence.
Yes, when you truly love to learn, the process itself becomes its own reward. That intrinsic motivation provides the fuel to persevere in his or her efforts, despite the types of frustration that challenging work with content can represent. It's considered the peak of well-developed individual interest, leading to full, sustained engagement.
That's a powerful connection. Learning for the sheer joy of it, and how that joy then fuels incredible persistence and resilience. Okay, finally, we loop back to perspective, which, as you said, is the specific strength that truly embodies wisdom itself. We touched on it briefly, but let's dive deeper. How does perspective relate to age or general intelligence, and what makes it distinct?
Right. The sources are very clear here. Wisdom or perspective is not of the passage of time, but of life experiences and how people respond to them.
How they respond. Crucial difference.
Crucial difference. While it might correlate with age, older people have had more experiences, it's not simply a function of accumulating birthdays. It's about how one processes and learns from those experiences, the meaning extracted. It's also explicitly distinct from intelligence as measured by IQ tests, although some modest overlap can exist.
So you can be brilliant but not wise, and maybe wise without being a genius.
Absolutely. Wisdom, in this sense, correlates positively with things like successful aging, enhanced well-being, and a whole cluster of positive personality traits like maturity, open-mindedness, even-temperedness, sociability, social intelligence, and the absence of neuroticism. It paints a picture of a holistically well-adjusted, insightful individual who navigates life's complexities with a certain grace.
It sounds like a really integrated state.
Yeah.
So it's about how you deeply process life, not just how many years you've lived. And how can this invaluable perspective, this wisdom, be cultivated? The sources highlight the importance of social collaboration and, crucially, reflection.
Yes, exactly. Research specifically indicates that social collaboration, whether internal via virtual inner dialogue or external via discussion, facilitated wisdom-related performance if persons had time afterward to reflect on the discourse.
So talk about it, then think about it.
Pretty much. The act of discussing complex issues with others, sharing ideas, challenging each other, and then reflecting on that exchange is incredibly powerful for deepening understanding. Interestingly, the research found that older adults in particular benefited significantly from these actual dialogues with others, suggesting maybe a profound collective approach to wisdom cultivation as we age.
That's fascinating. And what about more practical interventions?
Well, suggestions include sustained exposure to classic works of literature and philosophy, things that wrestle with the big questions of life. Also, facilitating structured discussions, projects, and essays to draw out the lessons learned from experiences or texts, and actively emphasizing practical intelligence, applying knowledge to real-world problems.
Maybe how it's taught.
Yes, a Socratic method employed by teachers can effectively model perspective, guiding students to ask probing questions rather than just seeking quick answers. Furthermore, integrating an entire curriculum with multiple viewpoints, like meticulously learning history from diverse cultural perspectives, not just the dominant one, can actively produce wise students. It's a holistic, intentional approach, really.
That's a powerful vision for education and personal development, moving beyond just rote memorization to truly cultivating wisdom. So what does this all mean? If wisdom is such a critical strength, can it really be learned and developed throughout life? Or is it something innate, a fixed quality you either have or you don't?
This raises a fundamental question, doesn't it? And the sources directly and emphatically challenge the notion that wisdom is some fixed, immutable trait. They state unequivocally that wisdom can be fostered, learned, cultivated, and that doing so is essential to optimize human flourishing.
That's huge. It can be learned.
Yes, it lies on a continuum, meaning it's not simply present or absent, but rather something that grows and deepens over time with effort and experience. Researchers are actively exploring what is humanly attainable and what forms they may take regarding wisdom, which represents a highly optimistic and actionable outlook on human potential. It's a journey, not a static state.
That's incredibly encouraging. So it's a lifelong journey, not a destination. And if it can be learned, what are the foundational mechanisms or processes that are absolutely crucial for its development? The outline pointed directly to reflection as a key.
Reflection is indeed highlighted as the foundational mechanism or process for wisdom development, emphasizing deep and analytical modes. This isn't just passive musing or, daydreaming.
Not just staring out the window.
Great. It's an intentional process, not by happenstance. Wiser individuals aren't just accumulating experiences. They actively reflect on their memories as means to guide and direct their future behavior. They demonstrate a remarkable ability to grow from nebulae of experiences, not just bounce back from them. Learning the lesson, not just surviving the event. Exactly. This systematic, intentional processing of life events contributes significantly to building a sense of self, which is actually achieved through narrative, the coherent story you tell yourself about your life, your challenges, your growth, and its lessons.
So it's about actively processing and learning from our experiences, both good and bad, to shape our future actions and our very identity. What are some practical forms this deep analytical reflection can take in our daily lives? How do we actually do it?
Good question. The sources suggest concrete and accessible methods, things like consistent writing and journaling. Simply getting your thoughts down on paper allows for deeper processing, seeing patterns.
Getting it out of your head.
Precisely. Another is making notes as one is reading, actively engaging with the material, questioning it, connecting it to your own life rather than just passively consuming it. And finally, sharing results of reflection with others, articulating your insights, maybe talking it through with a trusted friend or mentor, getting feedback and refining your understanding through that dialogue.
So it can be solitary, like journaling or social.
Both seem valuable. These are tangible ways to engage in that deep analytical mode of reflection necessary for wisdom to flourish.
Okay. Beyond reflection, the path of self-awareness and self-knowledge also plays a fundamental role in cultivating wisdom. How does that connect?
Well, our sources suggest that knowing oneself and or being self-aware is a direct and powerful pathway to wisdom. Even if this innate human ability might sometimes feel, veiled deep inside of each individual, it's about peeling back layers to unveil that inner wisdom, understanding your own biases, motivations, trigger.
Knowing yourself.
Knowing yourself. And what's particularly fascinating here is the crucial role of empathy in this process. Empathy is described as a real ally of wisdom.
Empathy is an ally of wisdom. How so? It's not immediately obvious how tuning into others helps you know yourself better.
It's a profound connection, actually. Empathy, in this context, involves more than just understanding someone intellectually. It's tuning in and really staying with it and just experiencing what you think other people experience and allowing yourself to really absorb that.
Feeling it with them.
Crucially, yes.
Yeah.
Feeling it, not just intellectualizing it. This deep emotional absorption of another's experience, truly trying to put yourself in their shoes emotionally, is described as transformative.
How is it transformative for self-awareness?
By understanding others more deeply, their motivations, their struggles, their joys, you gain new perspectives on the human condition generally, which inevitably includes your own condition. It broadens your frame of reference, illuminating aspects of yourself, your reactions, your assumptions that you might not have seen clearly before. It breaks down the illusion that your experience is the only one.
It provides contrast and context for your own experience.
Exactly. Furthermore, for wise individuals, values are foundational to knowing oneself. They are rooted in values, they know their own values, and they often speak of guiding principles or core principles that steer their decisions, like a simple mantra. Do the right thing. This clear ethical compass is integral to their self-knowledge and thus their wisdom.
That's a truly holistic view, integrating cognition, emotion, empathy, and deeply held values. It's not just about individual internal processes, though. What about the role of social and broader experiential factors in cultivating wisdom? How do our environments and interactions with others play a part in this journey?
That's where the focus really expands beyond the individual to the collective and the cultural context. Strategies for wisdom development include deliberately adopting other people's perspectives as a means of increasing understanding. This means actively seeking out and trying to internalize different viewpoints, not just tolerating them.
Getting inside another viewpoint.
Yes. And another strategy is stepping back and looking at one's own life and priorities from a larger perspective, seeing your individual narrative, your current concerns, within a broader historical, societal, or even existential context. This really emphasizes the social and relational dimensions of wisdom, and crucially, the organizational culture, the environment in which people work and interact daily, plays an absolutely critical role.
So an organization, like a workplace, can either significantly help or severely hinder this development of individual and collective wisdom.
Absolutely, and the sources are very firm on this. They strongly advocate that organizations could offer wisdom development to all employees by creating a culture that fundamentally welcomes mistakes as learning and possible wisdom development opportunities.
That sounds great, but rare.
It can be rare, yes, but it's monumental. Because if the opposite happens, if blame or punishment is the response to mistakes, leaders and others who observe and hear about leader reactions will stop taking risks and making decisions.
They shut down.
They shut down. This fear-based environment effectively reduces the opportunity for wisdom development because wisdom often grows from navigating errors and complexities. It also negatively impacts innovation and creativity because people become risk-averse. And just on a pragmatic level, it also generally reduces efficiency as decisions will move upward in the organization, creating bottlenecks and stifling agility because no one wants to stick their neck out.
That makes so much sense. If you're afraid to experiment or admit an error, you're certainly not going to learn, grow, or innovate. This brings us to a particularly urgent and perhaps alarming observation from the sources. The idea that wisdom in the business world is described as a vanishing act.
Yeah, that phrase really jumps out.
It does. Why is there such an urgent and increasingly important call for wise leadership now? What's driving this perceived decline, this sense of urgency?
The need is described as increasingly important and relevant due to a confluence of powerful factors. First, there's just the overwhelming busyness, anxiety, and compulsive activity of contemporary society, which creates this sort of frenetic, short-sighted environment where deep thinking is hard.
The hamster wheel effect.
Exactly. This is coupled with the growing palpability of shared economic, environmental, and societal risks. Think global pandemics, climate change, geopolitical conflicts, rapid technological disruption. The sheer complexity and interconnectedness of today's challenges.
The wicked problem.
The wicked problems, exactly. Challenges with no easy answers, often defying traditional solutions, requiring adaptive, nuanced, wise responses. They demand a profoundly different kind of leadership than perhaps simpler times did. The sources assert quite starkly that the world needs more wisdom can hardly be doubted the moment one considers recent history and the global challenges.
So the world is becoming infinitely more complex and challenging, yet leadership has actually moved away from wisdom as a guiding principle. That's a striking and deeply concerning contrast. What caused this historical shift, this move away from prioritizing wisdom to, as the sources state, almost exclusively focusing on maximizing corporate profits?
It's a significant historical and cultural shift, and it has had profound implications. The sources highlight that the assessment of leadership has changed over the years, moving from a focus on wisdom and being wise to delivering on organizational results, such as maximizing corporate profits.
The bottom line became the only line.
In many cases, yes. This shift, driven by various economic theories and managerial philosophies that gain prominence, placed an almost singular emphasis on financial outcomes. This narrow focus, while appearing efficient by certain metrics, has ironically led to the startling observation that in an era when discontinuity is the only constant, the ability to lead wisely has nearly vanished.
Vanished. Wow.
Yeah. The sources are quite explicit that in this complex, interconnected landscape, shareholder profits alone are not a sufficient measure of organizational success. There's a broader responsibility, a deeper kind of impact, and maybe even long-term sustainability that's being overlooked in that narrow view.
That's a powerful indictment of where things have landed.
Yeah.
So if wise leadership is indeed vanishing, or at least endangered, how do our sources define it in a modern business context?
Yeah.
What does executive wisdom actually look like in the C-suite or among top managers today?
Well, Kolodinsky and Barley offer a really comprehensive and actionable definition of executive wisdom. They describe it as the actionable ability of a top organizational manager to apply accumulated knowledge, embody moral maturity, manage uncertainty, and engage in reflective strategic decision-making processes.
Okay, that's the ability. What does it lead?
Right. The results of this wise leadership are equally critical. It leads to 1, enlightened strategic judgments, smart decisions informed by ethics and broad perspective, and 2, effective implementation of principled actions that help to sustain long-term organizational effectiveness and positively impact a firm's most salient stakeholders.
Stakeholders, not just shareholders.
Crucially, yes. So it's about making smart, ethical decisions that consider a broad range of impacts on employees, customers, society, the environment over the long term. Another researcher, Hay, offers an even more concise and pragmatic distillation, defining wisdom simply as doing the right thing for the greater good, all things considered.
Doing the right thing for the greater good, all things considered.
Yeah.
I like that. It's a brilliant, straightforward distillation of a complex concept. And what about a wise organization itself? What characteristics would it embody beyond just having wise leaders at the top?
A practically wise organization, as the sources term it, is described as one that fundamentally understands and delivers to the moral and ethical expectations of all stakeholders, its members, customers, suppliers, partners, and others.
A broad view of responsibility.
Very broad. Their corporate goals extend far beyond mere profit. They are genuinely focused on service to others and contributing in a positive manner to the world. This signals a significant cultural shift, moving beyond a purely scientific technological approach, focused only on efficiency or innovation, to embrace a culture of moral responsibility and a sense of broader societal contribution. Such an organization sees itself as an integral ethical part of the ecosystem it operates within, not separate from it.
That's a massive shift in mindset and operational philosophy for many organizations, especially those historically fixated on quarterly results and shareholder value above all else. But clearly there are significant challenges and systemic impediments to cultivating this kind of wisdom in business. What are some of the biggest hurdles that stand in the way?
One major impediment identified is what the sources call the ego management hurdle.
Ego management. Tell me more.
Well, many leaders, particularly in traditional corporate structures, operate under the deep-seated belief that they are not leading unless they are confident, decisive, and in full command. In this view, asking for help is a sign of weakness.
The hero-leader myth.
Exactly. This tendency not only hinders their own learning and ability to gather diverse perspectives because they feel they have to know it all, but it also actively impedes the learning and development of the talented people around them and limits scale, because subordinates become reluctant to offer dissenting views, challenge assumptions, or suggest potentially risky, innovative ideas.
It stifles the team.
Completely. Interestingly, even the WISE nominees themselves, when interviewed for some of this research, highlighted ego management as crucial for wisdom. They recognize that humility and openness are key, even if those traits are often suppressed or seen as liabilities in the broader business world.
That's incredibly insightful. The leaders themselves, recognizing that internal ego hurdle. We discussed this earlier in the context of individual wisdom, but it bears repeating for organizations, the profoundly detrimental impact of punishing mistakes.
Absolutely. The sources reiterate this point because it's so fundamental to learning, growth, and ultimately wisdom in an organizational context. If, blame or punishment is the response to mistakes, leaders and others who observe and hear about leader reactions will stop taking risks and making decisions, period.
Creates a culture of fear.
A culture of fear, exactly. This fundamentally stifles the experimentation, innovation, and learning from experience that are necessary for wisdom to emerge and for the organization to adapt to those wicked problems. It doesn't just reduce opportunities for wisdom development, it actively negatively impacts innovation and creativity, and as we mentioned, it even generally reduces efficiency as decisions will move upward in the organization, creating bureaucratic sludge.
So it's not just a nice to have or a matter of soft skills. A blame culture is actively detrimental to the business's core performance and agility. Are there also issues with the very language and underlying culture within corporations that prevent wisdom from taking root, making it feel like an alien concept?
Yes, the sources pose a critical question here. Whether business has the language to move in a different direction, beyond the conventional, often narrow vocabulary focused solely on profit and growth. The prevailing corporate lexicon, The words we use shape how we think, can actually constrain thinking and limit the scope of what's considered important or even discussable.
If you can't talk about it, you can't foster it.
Precisely. Furthermore, the corporate environment and how one is treated as an employee is described as very relevant to wisdom and wisdom development. If an employee feels their voice is accepted, if they are treated well with respect and fairness, it's very easy to be aligned and motivated and wise, or at least to contribute wisely. Conversely, an environment characterized by fear, disrespect, or rigid hierarchies makes wisdom cultivation incredibly difficult, as individuals will simply not feel safe enough to offer the nuanced perspectives, dissenting opinions, or ethical concerns that wisdom requires.
That points to a significant disconnect then. If wisdom is so important, especially now, and the world so desperately needs it, why isn't it already a central integrated part of business training and leadership development? Is there a significant gap between the academic understanding of wisdom and its practical application in the corporate world?
There appears to be, yes, and it's a chasm that needs bridging. While wisdom and leadership have traditionally been linked through the ages in philosophy, religion, and various cultural traditions, the contemporary conversation around wisdom has been substantially within an academic context as opposed to within a business context.
Stuck in the ivory tower.
To some extent, yes. This intellectual silo has led to a widespread lack of leader knowledge about what wisdom actually entails in a practical sense, and consequently, a lack of widespread adoption and practical integration of wisdom principles within organizational practices and leadership development programs. It's a conceptual and practical divide that prevents theory from becoming effective action, leaving many leaders unprepared for today's complexities.
And further complicating things, wisdom often involves something quite intangible: tacit knowledge. What exactly is that, and why does its very intangibility make cultivating wisdom in a structured business environment more complex?
Right. Tacit knowledge is fundamentally different from explicit knowledge. Explicit knowledge is the stuff you find in textbooks, manuals, databases. It's easily codified, written down, communicated, and taught.
Facts and procedures.
Exactly. Tacit knowledge, on the other hand, is acquired primarily from direct hands-on experience. It's procedural, intuitive, deeply embedded in an individual's judgment, their feel for a situation, their action-oriented skills. It's the know-how that's incredibly difficult to articulate or explicitly teach.
Like riding a bike, you can't really explain it.
That's a classic example. Or think of a seasoned craftsman who just knows how much pressure to apply, or a brilliant strategist who senses the right move without being able to fully articulate every single reason why. Because it's not easily communicated or formalized, its cultivation is more complex than simply running a workshop or sharing a best practices document.
So how do you cultivate it?
It requires sustained practice, immersive experiential learning, mentorship from those who possess it, and environments where individuals can build and apply that knowledge over time, often through trial and error, and crucially, reflection on that experience.
Okay, so we've identified the urgent need for wise leadership in our increasingly complex world and the significant impediments standing in its way: ego, blame culture, language barriers, the academic gap, the challenge of tacit knowledge. Now, for the really crucial part, what are the concrete, actionable strategies for actually developing wise leaders and, by extension, fostering wise organizations? How do we begin to cultivate this seemingly elusive quality?
Well, it fundamentally begins, the sources suggest, with fostering an ethical and deeply reflective culture. It's about the soil the seeds of wisdom need to grow in.
Ethical and reflective culture.
One key strategy is deliberating towards ethical models. This involves actively, consciously reevaluating existing mental models, the ingrained ways we think and make decisions within the organization. It means intentionally incorporating ethics and organizational impacts beyond the bottom line into every strategic discussion, every project plan, every performance review.
Building ethics into the system.
Building a conscience into the corporate structure, ensuring that decisions are filtered through a lens of their broader moral and societal implications, not just short-term financial gain.
So it's about building that ethical framework. And the importance of reflection, which we discussed for individuals, applies just as powerfully at the organizational level, right? Making dedicated space for it seems critical.
Absolutely essential. Organizations need to make a practical, intentional effort to provide both time and space such that employees and leaders are able to reflect on, refresh, and continue to develop their own wisdom. In our current hyper-paced, always-on business environment, this dedicated time for deep reflection is often the first thing sacrificed in the name of efficiency or immediate productivity.
Seen as a luxury, maybe.
Exactly. But it's not a luxury. It's absolutely essential for integrating learning, processing complex information, seeing patterns, and developing the deeper insights that form wisdom. Furthermore, a powerful strategy mentioned is learning from exemplars, studying wise nominees.
People already demonstrating wisdom.
Yes, individuals recognized within or outside the organization for their wisdom, even if they often embody a humility that prevents them from seeing it in themselves. These exemplars often demonstrate quiet but profoundly powerful virtues like patience, consistency, fairness, and a steadfast commitment to doing what's right without making a lot of noise. By observing, understanding, and perhaps even being mentored by these individuals, organizations can model and encourage these wise behaviors more broadly.
So, identifying and learning from those who quietly embody wisdom in action. What about formal leadership development programs? Are they doing enough, or do they desperately need to be redesigned to integrate this focus on wisdom, as the sources suggest?
The sources strongly suggest that current leadership development programs, for the most part, are insufficient and need to be fundamentally redesigned. They argue that these programs need to explicitly aim to contribute to the development of wise leaders within an organizational context, rather than merely assuming wisdom will somehow magically emerge from standard education or job experience alone.
So be intentional about developing wisdom.
Be intentional. This means broadening leadership training beyond purely technical skills, financial acumen, or even tactical managerial competencies. Organizational executives are encouraged to integrate their own definition of wisdom, both at an organizational level, defining what a wise organization looks like for them, and a leader-focused level by explicitly incorporating the organization's deeper purpose and values into the training.
Connecting leadership to purpose and values.
Yes, and considering success metrics beyond mere profit and growth, emphasizing tangible benefits for all stakeholders. This resonates strongly with significant contemporary movements like the commitment of 181 CEOs in the Business Roundtable statement a few years back, moving towards a more stakeholder-centric view of corporate responsibility. It's a call for a fundamental reorientation of what we train leaders for.
That sounds like a truly transformative reorientation of what leadership training should aim to achieve. Beyond those broad strategic strokes, culture, exemplars, program redesign, are there more practical, day-to-day strategies that individuals and organizations can implement to actively cultivate wisdom? Things people can start doing tomorrow.
Yes, very much so, both for individuals within the organization and for shaping the broader organizational culture. For individuals, these include actively promoting exposure to novel experiences to offer mental stimulation and foster creativity.
Get out of the rut.
Get out of the rut. This could be anything from intentionally trying a new route to work, engaging with a book or documentary completely outside your usual field, volunteering for a cross-functional project, or taking on a task that pushes you beyond your comfort zone. The goal is to consistently disrupt routine and challenge your existing mental models.
Keep the brain flexible.
Exactly. Another crucial practical strategy is deliberately adopting other people's perspectives as a means of increasing understanding. This isn't just about passively listening. It's about actively trying to understand why someone holds a different view, stepping into their shoes metaphorically to genuinely grasp their reasoning, their assumptions, their emotional landscape.
Active empathy again.
Active empathy, yes. This could involve seeking out diverse viewpoints in meetings, engaging in structured debates where you have to argue the other side, or even just practicing deep, empathetic listening in daily interactions without immediately jumping to rebuttals.
And stepping back to gain that larger perspective, as we mentioned earlier, that's a practical tool too.
Absolutely. Stepping back and looking at one's own life and priorities from a larger perspective is a powerful, almost meditative tool for individual wisdom development. It involves intentionally creating moments, maybe daily, weekly, to reflect on your goals, your values, and your actions in the grand scheme of your life and the world around you. Helps reset priorities.
The things in perspective, literally.
Literally. Then, on an organizational level, the critical strategy of embracing learning from mistakes is reiterated as absolutely foundational. The culture must fundamentally welcome mistakes as learning and possible wisdom development opportunities.
Make it safe to fail smartly.
Make it safe to fail smartly, exactly. This counteracts the tendency for decisions to move upward in the organization due to fear of blame. This requires leadership to actively model vulnerability and curiosity in the face of setbacks, not just punish errors. Finally, While tacit knowledge is difficult to formalize, its recognition and valuing within an organization is paramount.
How do you value something intangible?
By encouraging mentorship, apprenticeship programs, creating opportunities for hands-on, experiential learning where tacit knowledge is primarily built through doing and reflecting on that doing. Fostering a continuous learning environment where practical wisdom can truly thrive and, importantly, be passed down through relationships and shared experiences, not just manuals.
So what does this all mean for you, our listener? We've journeyed from understanding character strengths as the very building blocks of a flourishing life to delving deeply into the multifaceted nature of wisdom, both as an individual virtue that, yes, can be cultivated, and as a crucial yet clearly challenged quality in today's complex business and societal landscape. We've explored how this profound quality can be nurtured through intentional reflection, deep self-awareness fueled partly by empathy, and a courageous willingness to learn, not just from successes, but crucially, from mistakes, and by actively embracing diverse perspectives.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, why should you care? Well, this isn't just academic theory or abstract philosophy. These are concrete insights, hopefully directly applicable to your own life, your leadership style, and the environments you inhabit, whether that's your home, your team at work, or your entire organization. Understanding these strengths, and particularly how wisdom works and how it can be fostered, offers a truly powerful shortcut. Not just to being informed about the world in terms of facts, but truly well-informed, in a deeper sense, equipped with the capacity for better judgment, deeper understanding, and more effective ethical action in the face of all this complexity we've talked about.
And as you leave this deep dive today, maybe consider this provocative thought, something to mull over. If wisdom at its core is really about doing the right thing for the greater good, all things considered, how might you intentionally create more time and space for genuine reflection and that deliberate perspective-taking in your own week? Recognizing, as we've discussed, that the cultivation of wisdom is not a quick fix or a final destination you arrive at, but a continuous, deeply rewarding, lifelong journey.